Welcome to another episode of Success Kings. I'm your host, Sal Lodi, and I thank my viewers for tuning in today. We got a very special guest. He's renowned in the industry. He's been in the HVAC industry for the last 45 years. Recently, he has, or at least for the last 7 years, he's been training people on contractors and salespeople alike on indoor air quality products. I'll let John take it from here. John, can you go ahead and give our viewers a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely.
And so just the quick snapshot. So again, yeah, I've been in the industry for over 43 years. And I recently owned a HVAC company in California, which you're well aware of, Sal. And but in the last 7 years, I've been teaching indoor air quality for the HVAC Learning Campus for Daikin Amana Goodman. Now, they approached me and said, John, we need somebody to write curriculum for IAQ. And I said, I am absolutely your person, but I will not stand in front of an audience and sell products because that's what everybody else does. I said, this has to be the nuts and bolts and science behind indoor air quality.
Right.
And so they gave me free reign. Of course, I had to get it through legal, and that was a fun thing to do. But anyway, it's been well received. I've been teaching it all over the United States and Canada. It's building science, building forensics, and IAQ from a mechanical point of view. I wrote this for the HVAC industry.
Right. I want to back up a little bit. I used to actually work for John. And in my time there, I learned a lot from John. I'll tell you, John, you're like a scientist when it comes to this IAQ. I remember that. I mean, a lot of your install, practices, I use them in my installs. Actually, I mean, I never used hard cast tape before I met you. I remember, we used to use hard cast tape on all of the installs, and you made sure you collected those rolls after every job. Hey, that's right? Expensive. But yeah. So I mean, how did you get involved in indoor air quality?
Well, before we jump in, there's more. Wait, there's more. I own a consulting business, so I didn't want to be doing contracting anymore. So I moved from California to the mountains of New Mexico.
Right.
In my consulting business, I help people all over the United States that are compromised in one way or another. I work with families, especially children. And so I use that opportunity, no matter where I'm at, to bring contractors with me. They get to use all my testing equipment. They get to see the testing procedures. They get to understand how to have the conversation with the client. And at the end of our time, we get to write a scope of work for that client that's tailored just for what they're experiencing. Right. And I can't price it for them because every marketplace is different. So they'll have to do that, but they get a good understanding on how to use the equipment, what the data is telling us, and creating a scope of work based on data. And it's been an amazing journey just in that. I am a business coach.
Give us an example of what exactly, like just a scenario maybe you've dealt with where you were called out to create this scope of work. Like what was so harmful for the end users in their air quality?
So I'll give you one example. I worked with a company in Houston, Texas. They took my training. They're a good company. They were well on their way. They adopted a lot of the NCI's testing methodology as far as HVAC. So pretty smart guys. They had an opportunity to work with a client. They called me up and said, hey, John, there's a little bit above our pay grade. Would you be interested in coming out and helping us with this? And so I gave them my cost, and they ran it by the homeowner. The homeowner was absolutely on board. And so the situation was the girl was 16 years old at the time and had to wear what they call an iron lung. And what that is a prosthetic that she wears on the outside, and it compresses her lungs like, wow, and helps her breathe. And so everything in the home had to be just right to help ensure that her healing, that she didn't get any worse. So with that in mind, we went out, we went through the whole barrage of testing. They wrote a scope of work. They had 3 air conditioning systems. It was a larger home. All the systems were only 3 to 5 years old. They were there before the client had moved in. And so we wrote the scope of work. We had the conversation with the client, and they called me back in a couple of weeks. They said, John, we just sold this job for $62,000, no equipment. And they've been monitoring, and she's the daughter's doing really well. And of course, there's nothing that we can do as contractors that's going to magically cure her, but we can assure quality of life and promote healing and get her to a place where she can live comfortably in her home. And that's just one example.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So is there like some on a lot of this product or some of this product, is there like a white paper that people can use for like their insurance will cover it, or?
So that's a very interesting question. And I just want to be perfectly clear. And you made the statement, is there a product? And is there a white paper on the product? I want to be perfectly clear. We are not about products. We are about a solution, right? And then the solution may have some products, but we don't want to be about a product sitting in the truck just looking for a problem. We have to fully understand what the client is experiencing and create a solution for that problem that may include, some products. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is why is indoor air quality? I know you just touched on it, but important in commercial buildings, you would say.
So that's a tall order. Commercial space operate on a tight budget. Maintenance is not always a top priority. When buildings are first commissioned, everything is set, and then through the years, building engineers and maintenance people come in and they change things. Maybe they don't do their filter maintenance as frequently as possible, and so now we've got things that start to get dirty or fall out of specifications. And then with commercial spaces too, you have so many different people in occupying a space with a whole range of different things that they experience, and trying to, and as doing commercial, just keeping the temperature right for everybody is a tough one, because one person's freezing and they got a space heater under their desk, and the other guy's sweating, and he or she has going to the thermostat trying to change the thermostat. So trying to cater to that many people is a tough one. But we have some standards, ventilation standards, building pressure standards, filtration standards, and if we can adhere to those standards, we're well on their way. But it's really hard to maintain, especially when they operate on such a tight budget. Now, residential, on the other hand, is easier because you've only got a certain amount of occupants in a space. Right. They understand what they're experiencing in that space. And if there's only like 4 or 5 people, well, it's real easy to get a handle on that and then be able to address it accordingly. Does that make sense? Did I explain that good?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you think that indoor air quality is impacting the workplace? The fact that they don't have it. I mean, what would you say?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And if somebody's experiencing allergies or has asthma, and there's triggers and thermal comfort discrepancies, it's in the workspace, because we have such an occupancy load, we've got carbon dioxide buildup. And so many studies are out there that with proper ventilation and filtration and thermal comfort, that we can increase productivity. We can increase cognitive attention. And so if you're sitting there and you're miserable, a good amount of your time is sitting there thinking about how miserable you are. because there's stuff going on in the workplace. So there's plenty of studies out there that allude to, hey, having proper ventilation, keeping your carbon dioxide levels down, cognitive attention, and all that stuff.
Yeah. In my house, I have, you know, so I was working for, I don't remember if it was you or maybe somebody right before or after you, but I was installing some air scrubbers by Aris. I'm sure you're familiar with that product, right?
Absolutely.
And I had installed it into this one house where I'll never forget. There was some funky odor in that house. Let's just say that, and I put that filter in and or the air scrubber in, and after 3 months, I came back to do a maintenance. And when I walked in the door, I mean, the odor was just gone, and I had to bring it up to the guy. I was like, "Look, your house smells a lot better with this air." He's like, "Dude, this thing is amazing." He said not only that, but his wife had a drip in her nose. Constantly has some kind of a drippy nose, and he said it just went away. And I was just like, that moment right there. I was like, when I buy my house, I'm going to have an air scrubber in my system. And that's exactly what I did. Like, first thing I did was change the HVAC system. And when I put the new system in, I put in the air scrubber by Aris. And I live and die by it. But I mean, what do you think about the numerous air scrubber products that are out there?
All right. Well, I'm about to burst your bubble, and so don't take it personal. I cut the cords off of air scrubbers as fast as contractors can install them. They're a placebo, and a lot of times they create worse pollutants than what we're trying to address.
Right.
So first of all, an air scrubber is PCO technology, photocatalytic oxidation. In that process, you have a UV light, and the light spectrum interacts with titanium dioxide. The titanium dioxide, in reaction with the UV spectrum, creates hydroxyl radicals. Now, the hydroxyl radicals have a very short lifespan, or half-life, if you will. But the premise behind an air scrubber is the hydroxyl radical, being just what it says, radical, will attach itself to a pollutant or a molecule, or even a smell molecule. And because it's radical and it's half-life, it breaks down and takes that molecule or odor with it. Now, that being said, for every action, there is a reaction. And so for my clients, the reaction is an absolute no-go. So the byproducts of a photocatalytic oxidation, right, PCO, is it creates formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is a known VOC, and it's absolutely a no-go. It creates nitrous acid. Nitrous acid has an adverse effect on our metabolism. The same hydroxyl radical that can break down an organic molecule can also break down the organic compounds and molecules within our lungs. And then the third thing is it creates carbon dioxide. So if you're in a space where carbon dioxide is already high, my limit is 600 ppm. ASHRAE standards say about 1,000 to 1,200 ppm, depending on the individual, case by case. If we're creating carbon dioxide and that is a problem within a space and you're adding to it, that's an absolute no-go. And there's some other trace chemicals that it also makes. So for my clients, and so I want you to understand who my client base is.
Right.
I help people with cystic fibrosis, COPD, immune deficiencies, oncology, lung transplant recipients, debilitating asthma, valley fever, Lyme's disease. These all affect respiratory. And so adding those compounds into the air is absolutely a no-fly for me. Now, I hear stories all the time. Oh, I put a PCO in and I feel great. Well, I've got 10 stories to back that one story that say, hey, you put the PCO in, I feel terrible, take it out. And I actually do testing. And when you run a PCO, an air scrubber, your TVOCs will spike and go up.
Is there like a particulate scanner? Because I know like they have this one on Amazon called Foobot. I know IAQ Air makes one. I mean, is there anything that we could use to, scan particulates in the home for if we had an air.
Well, first of all, if you've got high particulates, a PCO is not the answer. It does nothing to address particulates. It is for quote unquote odor control and microbials, bacterial, spores. Theoretically, that's what they're meant to address. So if you are having a problem with particulates, a PCO is not the answer. If you have trouble with particulates, UV lights is not the answer. If you have trouble with particulates, one, it's either a building pressures problem, or you got filtration issues, and or you've got duct tightness problems. So probably predominantly return air leakage.
That if the envelope is not tight enough, it's going to be sucking in particulates from the outside air.
Because you have a pressure problem. Most houses start off in a negative pressure. So back to your question about the particulate scanner, I use a Lighthouse. It's expensive. It's $4,000, but it really measures particulates. Fubot, Sensi, all those other ones, they're $200. They're $200 little monitors.
They're like Fisher
you get
Price.
What you pay for.
Are they like Fisher Price?
And unfortunately, that's what the consumer has. They buy a $200 monitor, and I would question the accuracy, and then they make decisions based on that. Now it's something, and if you could like benchmark them to a better. So let's say your little Fubot's measuring, 150,000 particulates per cubic foot, but you bring in a really good one and you figure out, well, I'm actually only at 80,000 particulates per cubic foot at a certain size range. Well, then, you just do a little math, and that would help you calibrate, if you will, the accuracy of a cheap,
right.
Monitor.
So how has the public's awareness of IAQ issues changed, you would say, in the recent years? I mean, I know they have these, I know, I said IAQ Air, but I meant IAQ, but IAQ, IAQ, like the company IAQ Air, is it IQ Air or it's IQ?
IQ Air.
IQ Air. They sell these, and I've seen them in some houses, they sell these standalone air purifiers. I mean, that's kind of raised, I think, public awareness. People buying that product. What would you say has changed for public awareness?
So first of all, people who are compromised have always been aware of indoor air quality, and I want to make something clear too. It's not just the air; we're changing environments.
Absolutely.
So it would be indoor air and / environment. And so we're changing that. And I think the pandemic really raised the bar, unfortunate as it was, because people are spending more time at home. And then, it's like, hey, you know what? I feel great at work, but now all of a sudden at home, I'm not feeling so well. Or they look at that dingy wall. I think I'll paint. Heck, during the pandemic, I built a loft in my office. So, I mean, lots of things were happening, but people were staying home. And they're like,
absolutely.
Hey, you know what? I got a sniffle, or I got a headache, or I'm coughing, or I'm sneezing a lot, and I'm at home. As far as the IQ Air portable unit, it's called a Health Pro Plus. I got one in my room. They're absolutely fantastic. They're $1,000, but they're fantastic.
Right.
You can build a Comparetto cube using 4 2-inch filters and a piece of cardboard and a box fan on top, and accomplish the same thing.
Wow.
So it's just you gotta have something, So we love it. I actually wake up not sneezing, or because we have a lot of pollen and stuff in my area, and it actually really, really works. So, and I'm not here to endorse any one product over another, but they happen to have a good portable unit.
IAQ Air.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good recommendation. But going back to the issue in people's homes, in buildings, I mean, putting an air scrubber in is not, you would say, is not the solution. It's more like, I mean, it's solving what issues, like allergies and odors, you would say, or I mean,
I don't know. I got contractors all over the United States that they put these things in on every unit, or they upsell and they try to push them on people.
Right.
But the first question I ask is, what problem are you trying to solve? And like I said, if you've got particulates, that's not the answer, right? Filtration is the answer. If you've got high TVOCs, well, guess what? That's not the answer either, because you're creating TVOCs. That's organic volatile organic compounds.
Right.
And so what we are so, and I say we as our industry, are so laser focused on products, we miss the boat. You have to know what you're trying to solve. What are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
By installing these products.
So I mean, it's either going to be a filtration issue or a pressure issue. Solve those two things first.
Possibly. Now you're in California, and I used to have my business in California. California is a bubble. Once you get out of California and start heading across the United States, there is a whole world out there. So my 6 key principles for IAQ that can be adapted to any marketplace is 1, thermal comfort. Okay, we're in the comfort business, right? People who are compromised can have a wide range of how they feel just based on thermal comfort, and everybody's different.
Right.
Filtration. Every system here has a filtration system in it, right? Jeffrey May's book, My House is Killing Me, he says the HVAC industry is largely responsible for the health of the nation because almost every space, the air goes through a mechanical system at one point or another. And so that's a lot of responsibility for us on how we treat the air, filter the air, clean the air.
Who said that? Who said that?
Jeffrey May's My House is Killing Me. It's a wonderful book. I had it on audio because I drive all over the United States and I listen to it. It's an eye-opener. He does a really great job.
I got to check it out.
So we got thermal comfort and filtration. The next big one is ventilation. Every home should have some kind of ventilation approach in it, whether you're in California or Florida. Now, I'll say this. The why never changes, just the how, right? Just how you accomplish it. I used to get away with stuff in California I could never get away with in Houston, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, New Jersey. I can never get away with it.
Why is that?
But because of the climate. California's nirvana, my friend. Like no humidity.
Right.
Yeah. And so then there's ventilation. The next would be humidity control. Too much or the lack thereof.
Got it.
Right?
Very important. Very important.
Yep. And then next I would bring in building pressures. So that's a little more on the building science side. But building pressures are really important to understand how air moves in and out of a space, even without any mechanical influence. And then pollutant identification and source control. 1, what is the pollutant that we're trying to address? 2, where's it coming from? Is it outside getting in? Is it inside the space? Is it the materials in the space, furniture, flooring, paints, different things? Is it products that we're using? Are we using Febreze? Do we, bounce dryer sheets and then we put our head in the pillow all night and we wake up with runny nose and eyes? So identification and source control. Those are my 6 key foundational things.
Wow.
If we could get a handle on those 6,
right,
we don't need an air scrubber. You don't need it.
An air scrubber, I guess you're trying to say, is like more of a Band-Aid, but I mean, not just for some things, but you're saying for other things, it's gonna make it worse, essentially.
Well, yes, and they've gotten, there's several different companies. You mentioned one that out there, and after the pandemic, they were making all kinds of claims, and there's actually class action lawsuits because of some of those claims they were made.
Wow!
But it's reactive and not proactive. So what are you trying to accomplish? You have to know the technology and the science behind the technology and the pros and cons.
Right.
And so that's photocatalytic oxidation. Now, a lot of people don't even understand how UV technology works. So it's either UV, far UV, UVC. There's different spectrums
of UV.
And so of UV. I endorse UV, but it's got to be installed properly. When I go out into the field all over the United States, I see these things in the darndest places. If they're not installed properly, they're not doing anything. But a lot of people say, oh, yeah, UV lights kills bacteria and spores and different things.
Have you ever seen the hand? I just saw a hand dryer. It looked pretty cool. And you put your hand under there and it dry, but it has a UV light also. So is the hot air coming out plus the UV light on your hand? I mean, is that gonna do anything for anybody? That little UV light? No way.
No. First of all, UV will attack the cells on your skin, and you can't look into it. So 22 nanometers is kind of the standard for residential. So if it is quote unquote a UV light, it might be like 5 nanometers, which is really not enough to do anything if you understand the science behind UV technology. 3 basic principles, that would be the intensity of the UV spectrum, dwell time, or the amount of time that any kind of bacteria, spore, or a pathogen is exposed, and then the distance from which the UV is to that. And so I endorse having UV lights on the evap coil if you're having a problem with microbial growth on the coil.
Got it.
There's guys, they put them everywhere. They say, oh, yeah, it treats the air system. No. It does not. When you got a bacteria, spore, or pathogen that's zipping by a UV light at 492 feet per minute like that, it's not doing anything. As a matter of fact, it's probably saying, woo, let's do that again.
Yeah, that's funny. But, so getting back to the air scrubber, so it's probably better just to have a UV light than have an air scrubber. Would you say? I mean, that'd be more effective, in your opinion?
What are you trying to accomplish?
I'm just.
I keep.
If there is no, what I'm trying to say is like you said, if there's bacteria buildup, or you're trying to prevent that on the evap coil, to put in an air scrubber with the UV light may not be as effective as just maybe putting in a UV light.
Straight UV.
That's it.
To treat the surface of that coil.
Got it.
And they and some PCOs emit ozone, but just hydroxyl radicals on their own can be, because they're attacking organic compounds right at a molecular level, and because they're radical, breaking them down. But if we inhale them, we're organic. Right. And there's a possibility that we could be causing some harm in the body. Tear ducts, skin, lungs, especially.
Amazing. So you did say something about IAQ technology. I mean, how is IAQ technology advanced in recent years?
Well, there's only 3 main. There's about 4 technologies. One's the use of ozone, but they put the squash on that. The Air Resources Board and CARB out of California say, hey, no more ozone generation. Right. And then there's PCO technology, which I just explained. We know what that is. Right. There's UV technology, which I explained. And then there's bipolar ionization or needlepoint ionization. Those are kind of the technologies that are there. Out of those 4, the only one I recommend is UV installed properly on a coil. But there are some other advances being made, and when we talk about products, and Haven IAQ has made great strides, and it's an induct air quality monitor with a controller, and it does demand. We've been doing demand ventilation in commercial spaces for a long time.
Wow.
You've got a conference room, library, and the carbon dioxide, because of how many people are there, gets too high. It'll trigger the economizer, open up and let fresh air in, and so we can dilute and bring those levels down. Well, this does the same in a residential. It can bring on the dehumidifier if humidity gets high. It'll bring on the fan at a low speed if our particulates get too high to filter. It'll bring on dehumidification or humidification, and it'll bring on the ventilator. And so that's really great strides for residential. There are other folks coming out with some of the same things, and they're going to build them into smart thermostats. And I think we talk about iOS systems and smart homes. Well, as we start looking closer and closer at the built environment and with energy and making homes tighter and tighter and different things, IAQ is becoming more on the forefront. Yeah, I want it to be comfortable. I want it to be safe. I want to control humidity, and I want to be able to do it all from my laptop or my phone. Well, being able to see certain parameters and having it happen by itself with a controller is fantastic. But hey, I just got an alert on my phone and things are a little bit out of whack. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my AC and or turn on this and turn on that. So that's going to become more and more prominent as we move forward in the built space.
You're saying that these IAQ monitors are going to be built into some thermostats that you can purchase?
Absolutely. That is that's where we're at right now. There's some things coming. Resudio's working on one. Ecobee is working on a couple things as well. Honeywell IAQ thermostat has always, the 3-wire, has always been kind of on the forward edge, but they're trying to make advances in that as well, where not only are we going to measure this stuff, but we're going to make stuff happen without the customer having to make any adjustments.
Right. What's your thoughts on, this question right here, I just want to know, what do you think about furnace versus heat pumps when it comes to humidity control?
Well, so the machine is the machine,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so heat pumps can do a fairly good job at dehumidification. So we have sensible latent. Our sensible latent ratio is different in California than it is anywhere else, because in California, we're looking at 20, maybe 30% latent, and the rest is sensible. But you go across the United States, it's exactly opposite.
Wow.
And so as we're looking at heat pumps and inverter systems, we want to make sure that that design is it can't be expressed enough. Sizing, because you have to do a proper load calculation, and we're seeing smaller units, longer runtime to address the latent side of our load. More and more people are using supplemental dehumidification in tandem with heat pumps, just to make sure that we're able to address our latent load in the home.
That's in other parts of the country. That's in outside of California.
Correct.
Right.
So California is prime for inverters. They're prime because our load swing isn't that great. And their codes are trying to electrify everything, and they're building tight homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so California market is prime right now for inverter and heat pump. In Oregon, because they have such a big temperature swing, so keep in mind that California has 16 climate zones just within California.
Right.
And so Lake Tahoe, or San Fernando Valley, even San Diego, which is called a coastal desert, which hey, we're at the ocean, but it's still desert. And so there's a lot of different things going on. But in Oregon, they do heat pumps with furnaces as your supplemental heat. Your auxiliary heat. Mm-hmm. So you have a heat pump inverter with a furnace, and instead of using heat strips, the furnace comes on when the temperature drops below
dual fuel. Dual fuel.
So that's a great setup. A great alternative too for California.
Yeah, but I heard that, and I don't know how true it is, but furnaces will dry up the air a lot quicker than a heat pump. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely false.
Really?
Yeah, but that's hard to prove in California for the simple reason that California is already pretty dry.
Mm-hmm.
But people like combustible heat. They just like, because you've got 130-degree air coming out with your heat rise, heat loss, depending on where that's at, versus a heat pump that's only putting out 95, maybe 100-degree air. It doesn't feel
as
the
hot.
same,
Right.
but warmer air holds more moisture. If you look at your psychometrics, warm air holds more moisture. And so using a heater as dehumidification is not really the answer in some places. And so you have to understand some basic psychometric principles. That's why in commercial spaces we will bring in a certain amount of outside air. We will drop the temperature of that air to remove the humidity, and then we will reheat that air for comfort. So if you were to just bring in a certain amount of outside air plus ambient indoor air and heat it, it would be humid. So we have to understand some basic psychometric principles as we change. So temperature and pressure are also very important to understand when you're looking at how we temper the air and remove or add humidity.
Right. John, thank you for clearing up some misconceptions in IAQ and with the air scrubber. Is there anything else that people have misconceptions of when it comes to IAQ, you would say?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and we have
to
understand,
like the charcoal filter. People use. I tell my clients you don't need such a thick filter. They'll put this charcoal filter or the highest MERV rated filter. I think it's added static pressure to the motor, and it could harm the motor for the system. What do you think?
Well, and I'm glad, Sal, that you said it just the way you said it. So the comment was, what about a charcoal filter? Well, first of all, charcoal impregnated filter is made from burnt coconut husks. So they take the husks, they burn the coconut, and they take the charcoal and they impregnate a filter. So we have to understand the difference between charcoal and truly activated carbon. Carbon is used for absorption, and the process in which they activate the carbon pellets is pretty involved. Versus charcoal. Now, charcoal by default is carbon, but any absorption principles that are in charcoal are done. Based on time of use and especially in a humid climate.
We've learned a lot on this episode. John took me to school, and I thank you for that. I'm going to go home and take my air scrubber out.
Right.
Your insight, your knowledge is so appreciated. And, we look forward to getting this DS16 off the ground and in our homes. Thank you.